to help us. Yes, Denise.
Well, I think it's interesting that, and ourselves included at times, we're assuming God isn't there. We can't feel him, or, this seems so awful and he must not be here. And in the Bible, in more than one place, but it says that he's suffering right along with us, that he's crying with us, and he's, there with us.
Would you remember Palm Sunday? Palm Sunday, when Jesus is about to ride into the town where he's about to be put to death. Why did he have tears in his eyes?
Because he knew what was going to happen.
No, it wasn't about him. That at Garden of Gethsemane was. So, and I'm not saying those tears weren't there, but he wept for Jerusalem because all those people didn't know the way of salvation. They were going to miss out on heaven. And when people are mocking him on the cross, he's already had about every type of physical pain you can have to deal with, and then they're offering verbal abuse on top of that. And what does he do? He prays for them. And to a guy whose entire life had been nothing but violence to other people, promises paradise when the guy looks to him in faith. That's where we're leading people to. And it is someone who is familiar. He's familiar with our sufferings. It says, I think in the book of Hebrews, I'd have to look that up. But in his heart goes out to us because he's been there, done that, knows what we're going through. In fact, knows even more than what we're going through. He's experienced. Yeah, so that's the God we're trying to lead people to. Is not the God that they're coming up with in their imagination, but a God who feels our pain, walked on this world, experienced the worst the world could give, and did it all for us, to rescue us, to save us. So, yeah, but that's the unbelievable part. Go ahead.
I didn't realize till recently that Psalm 56:8 says, and it's talking about God, it says, you have collected all my tears in your bottle, you have recorded each one in your book. So it's not even one that he doesn't know about, and that he hasn't suffered with.
Yeah, and you've been making those bottles.
Yeah,
with that.
and if anybody wants them, I can make them, but they're just bottles that have the Bible verse on it and tears.
And tears painted on it. That's the bottle of your tears that God has collected, because he knows what you're going through, and he cares. Yeah. So that's kind of the big picture. So we'll end on that, but I don't like to start without talking about Jesus. So we had to talk about that. All right. So why is there suffering? So now we're going to go through 3 big categories, and then we'll start breaking things down, and we'll look at some Bible passages too. Some suffering comes into my life because I'm stupid. Right? Hey, you didn't have to agree, Denise. Now, and by the way, the rest of you, you didn't have to be so enthusiastic.
Sometimes a little bit foolish.
Yeah, well, I'm stupid is the right word.
I get it. We suffer because of our own.
Yeah. So in other words, and I have to tell you, I have many sins. Alcoholism is not one of my sins. Because communion wine is that little sip. Oh, wait, I finished the cup the other day. So I had like 3 gulps. So that's it for the year. I can't have no more except for communion. But if I drink too much and crash my car, the physical pain, the having insurance rates go up, a ticket, losing my license, all that kind of stuff, that's on me. We can't blame God for the suffering I brought into my own life. And a lot of times we do things that cause the suffering for ourselves. Yes.
That's really hard for people to understand today. Won't take.
Yes.
They won't
Well, it's never my fault. It's never really my fault. And the only reason I was drunk is because my wife was unreasonable to me, and she asked me to mow the lawn, and I had to go get drunk.
And the bartender gave you more than you should.
Yeah, it's the bartender, because he was supposed to keep track. I can't help. Yeah. But so let's start. Sometimes we suffer because of bad choices we make.
Well, for everything, some are good, some are bad.
Yeah, now we're going to the second category. Sometimes we suffer because of the bad choices other people make. So the difference is, Denise asked me to mow the lawn, and that sent me into a tizzy, and I got drunk, and I crashed into your car. not only did I bring suffering on me, I brought suffering on you. Now, you did nothing wrong, right? It was my choices, but my sinful choices, my bad choices, then brought misery into your life too. So sometimes we suffer not because of something we did to ourselves, but because other people make bad choices. And then there's this third big category, and we could break this down, but I'm just going to keep this simple. And sometimes we suffer for no reason at all except for sin. Now, what do I mean by that? Okay, go to John chapter 9. And we've looked at this story on Thursday nights before, and we'll just glance at a little bit of it. But John chapter 9, because this is a Bible study class, and it's almost halfway over, and we haven't touched our Bible, so I'm feeling bad about that. So we're going to look at the question, and we're going to look at the answer. So the question is John chapter 9, 1 and 2. So that's the question. John chapter 9, 1 and 2. As he went along, Jesus, saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? So, see now, remember I gave you two categories to begin with. Did he cause his own suffering by a specific sin, or did his parents do something that caused his suffering? So they were looking for someone in particular to tie to this man's suffering condition of being blind. All right? Somebody had to be the blame, either him or his parents. And it's very interesting. Jesus didn't agree with either one of those. Neither this man nor his parents sinned, but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. Now, all illness, all health problems are ultimately the result of sin. True? Might not be yours. Might not be one of your relatives. Might not be anybody's. The sin of the world. Adam's sin. Sin, okay, jump back to Genesis 3. And we are going to be looking at this on Sunday morning, so we're not going to do this in depth like we will on Sunday mornings, but just look for a second. So Genesis 3, and we'll kind of start at Genesis 3:16. So we got the fall into sin. The snake comes and starts talking to Eve. By the way, it was all Eve's fault, wasn't it?
No.
Yeah, please don't ever agree with me if I say that, because it's not true. Whose fault was it? Well, it was Eve's. It was Adam's, because Adam was right there, and he's the one who heard the instruction from God, don't eat this fruit from this tree, and he should have been speaking up and stopping this from taking place. So, yeah, we can blame Eve, and we definitely can blame Adam, and we can say Satan was there doing what Satan always does, leading into sin. But I just want you to see, so up until this point, how much suffering did Adam and Eve have in their lives? Absolutely none. So mosquitoes did not bite. Wood ticks didn't parasite into you, or whatever that is. Crocodiles didn't like to chew on human flesh or any sort of flesh. There was no violence, there was no illness, there was no bad weather. Never got freezing cold, never got so stinking hot you feel like you're going to pass out. It was perfect. Everything was perfect. But now look where pain starts. So look at verse 16. And we're starting in the middle of the consequences of sin. I will greatly increase your pains in childbearing. With pain you'll give birth to your children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. So what are the specific consequences that are mentioned there?
It's going to hurt when you give birth.
Yeah, one, bringing children into the world is not going to be total fun, right? And speaking on behalf of husbands everywhere, it's not total fun for us.
Well, they didn't have any kids before this all happened, so how would she even know the difference?
Yes, and now she wouldn't know, would she? But I'm going to tell you, when first child came along, just a little bit into Genesis, she did not enjoy all aspects of it. Yeah. just like women don't today. I mean,
I'll say normal circumstance, animals, livestock, wildlife, they don't have pain in delivery.
yeah, a lot of them have an easier time than humans do. Yeah. And by the way, I just got to say this. This has nothing to do with the text. The miracle of a new life being born from the mother. I mean, if you don't know there's a God, you know, when all that stuff, how that works, I can't even fathom it. That, you know, Suzanne was 8 pounds, 12 ounces. I almost added one. That would be wrong. 8 pounds, 12 ounces. And, you know, Denise is not a huge woman. And, you know, a baby that size came out of her through that little opening. And it's like, I was pretty well ready to pass out. I mean, that was dramatic for me.
I only gained 17 pounds.
Yeah, she gained 17 pounds and 9 of it came out right then. You know? But so, you know, that's one part. But if you notice, pain now becomes part of life. There was no pain prior to that first sin. Now pain is part of life. And notice also relationship issues created. Your desire will be for your husband, and he's not talking about you really want to hang around with your husband and he really wants to hang around with you. That's a good thing. No, this is, you know, your desire is to rule over your husband and his desire is to control you. And now we're going to have conflict. And so now we have relationship problems. We got physical pain. Look at Adam. This is verse, well, I guess, we'll just start 17. To Adam he said, because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree about which I commanded you. Notice God's emphasizing, you know, Eve wasn't there to get that command. Adam was. You must not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you'll eat of it all the days of your life. It'll produce thorns and thistles for you, and you'll eat the plants of the fields. By the sweat of your brow, you'll eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. So what type of suffering comes into the world in this part?
He has to work for it.
It's no longer going to be, in the Garden of Eden, all the food was there. You didn't have to do anything. You didn't have to plant. You didn't, you know, you just go pick what you felt like eating today. Everything was there. Now you're going to have to struggle to make ends meet. Now you're going to work hard. You're going to sweat. You're going to, the world is not a friendly place.
You're going to find the crows and squirrels.
Yeah, stealing your food.
And we
And you're going to find thorns and thistles and biting insects and biting bugs and biting this and biting that. Everything's different. So suffering came into the world because of sin. And the suffering has continued in spasms ever since. And in many senses, you know, when Jesus talks about his return at the end of time, and he says, you know, his return, the signals of it will be like birth pains. And they just keep getting more and more intense and more frequent. If you think what's happening with natural disasters and things, like right now, what's going on in the world right now that might be a warning signal from God? Anything? Well, we got wars and rumors of wars. Ooh, yeah, we still got those for sure.
It's kind of hard to put a finger on one specific word.
Yeah, well, I'm going to give you one. What's going on out west? Drought and extreme heat. And by the way, that means the fire season is going to be terrible again unless rains come. And you know, my son lives in California, and none of it comes too close to him. But I'm going to tell you, the smoke does, the ashes do, all that stuff. I mean,
It's been 99 in South Dakota.
yeah, it's in, you know, we're blessed because, you know, we'll probably get up to 90 on Sunday or something, but it hasn't been an extremely hot spring at all. You know, been kind of typical.
many countries Christians are persecuted.
Yes.
Like me.
But, you know, so you look at those warning signs. What 20-year period have more Christians been slaughtered because of their faith? Roman, you know, days of Paul, that time, you know, or when?
Just now.
Yeah, now. They don't make the news anymore because it's no longer newsworthy. But, you know, the sources I have, they're still Muslim extremists are still going into. A lot of countries in Africa have both a Muslim section and more of a Christian and other religion section, and they'll go up to a village and attack a school, especially kill all the boys and adults and take the girls. And taking the girls is not a real attractive choice either, because they're going to be forced to become Muslim brides or whatever at 9, 10, 11, 12, that type of stuff. But all this stuff is going on, and it's getting more and more frequent, more and more intense. But my point is, all of that goes back to original sin. Okay, glance at Romans 5:12. See, I'm making you jump all over your Bible. By the time we're done, you'll have every book figured out of you. Maybe not quite.
Romans what?
Romans 5:12. Hey, that clock's now almost right, except for the hour. It's okay, Donnie. Yeah, it's closer. Even a stop clock is right twice a day, is what they say. Yeah. So Romans 5:12. I got so busy being silly, I stopped turning pages. Here we go. Therefore, just as sin entered the world through one man, and death through sin, and in this way death came to all men because all sinned. Now, what does that tell us? The sin of the first Adam affects everyone, including us. Death entered then, but it affects all of us. By the way, if Adam and Eve hadn't sinned, we would have. So it's not that we can say, oh yeah, there's so much bad, you're worse than we are, and we would, we were the first two people, we wouldn't have done that. Yeah, we would have. We're no different. But the one sin that Adam and Eve committed, that's the cause of suffering in the world. Now, the big question is, why did God... I didn't do that on purpose. That really was not a frivolous thing. It's a pacing thing. I get excited and then I have to move. Why did God make Adam and Eve with free will where they could choose to eat the forbidden fruit?
Why did he make an angel that would fall away and take a third of the...
Why did he make angels because, by the way, after the fall of 1/3 of the angels, all the remaining angels were sealed in their devotion to God. None of them will ever go back. What happens to us when we make it to heaven? We're sealed in our devotion to God. None of us will go back there. But yes, so why did it? By the way, the reason God allowed the angels to have free will is because God needed Adam and Eve to have free will. Do you understand what I'm saying? So why did God want Adam and Eve to have free will?
Wouldn't choose to like...
All right, so let's suppose I really wanted someone to love me. Imagine I'm a 25-year-old and every time I tried dating, it just went sour. And young women didn't like me. Their moms were always heartbroken when they dumped me because I was a nice young man and I went to church and, didn't smoke pot or whatever else was common in those days. But so then I just give up. But so what could I do? Well, I could order a mail order bride. You remember 7 Brides for 7 something? What movie? What was the name of that movie?
For 7 Brothers.
7 Brothers. You remember that? They mail order. Fascinating concept. By the way, does that still happen?
Yes.
Yes, it does. It's not exactly sex trafficking, but it's really close. It's kind of scary and eerie to think about. But yeah, you can get a mail order bride, that someone who's going to be brought to you, and you can marry her, and she is your bride. But will she ever love you?
If you're lucky, you can find love.
Yeah. So now Martin Luther and Katie Van Bora, that was kind of an arranged marriage, arranged by Katie, actually, because she didn't want any of the young priests. She said, "You'll do," wanted to marry Luther. But they actually fell in love with each other as the years went by. It's kind of a beautiful thing. So it's possible, but most of the time, it's not going to be that way. You know what I'm saying?
If he didn't give us free will, it'd be akin to somebody doing a spell.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm put a spell on you. You're gonna love me whether you like it or not.
Or it's
And
having
it
a
would be
machine.
miserable.
You know,
Yeah.
there you can have a machine. Don't doubt there'll be robots that look realistic
Yeah.
at some point in time. Maybe they already are. And you could marry a robot, and the robot will do whatever you program it to. But you know, one thing the robot can't give you
His emotion.
is love. You know, it can give you a programmed version of love, but it can't give you love. What did God want from us? God is a God of love. That's his essence. That's who he really is. He made us to be in relationship, to be in, to love him and to be loved by him. He made us to be the bride and, you know, Jesus the groom. That it's a very intimate relationship. But if we're programmed to love him, that's not love. So he has to give us the ability not to love him. And by the way, they only had one commandment. That one commandment was given so that they could choose to reject God. By obedience, they were showing love to God. By disobedience, they were rejecting. But he had to do that. Did he know they were going to reject him? He already had the plan. Genesis 3:15 was the promise of Jesus. He already had the plan, you know, before he even made them. But you got to understand, God is a God of love. And he made us to walk with him through life on this earth, through life forever. And it breaks his heart that so many are walking away from him instead of with him. And because God cares about us, he sends Jesus. Yes?
Okay. This is going to be a slightly convoluted question.
Yeah, good. Yeah,
Someone would probably ask, and it's going to be me this time because this just came into my
That's all right.
head. If you already know what's going to happen, say God already knows that, how is it actually free will then, if he already knows what's going to happen? It's still a 50-50. Yes, I shoot this guy. No, I don't shoot this guy.
Yeah, from
Or to use that.
yeah, so
analogy.
if God knows we're going to do it, does that mean he causes us to do it? And I'm going to go, because here's where some people really feel sorry for Judas, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, when Jesus says it would be better for him if he had never been born, what that means is Judas ended up in hell. And we don't even like to think about that. But I'm going to tell you, that's not Jesus' fault. He didn't cause Judas to do that. In fact, even at that last moment when Judas was betraying him, what did Jesus call him? Friend, you betrayed me with a kiss. Was there anger? Just sadness. Just sadness. But, yeah, all right, go back to your question. Ask it again.
If he knows what you're already going to do before even you have come to that point knowing it or come to that decision, how is that actually free will?
Yeah, and so let's suppose my mom already knows that I got sent to the principal's office because there was a snitch in the school office. Not naming names, but you know. So I go home and she says, "Did anything unusual happen at school today?" I'm not saying this really happened, by the way. But, you know, might. Now, I had a choice there, didn't I? I could say no, which is what I did. That was me. No. Why do you ask? And then she says, "Well, I had a phone call." You know, now, did she know I was going to lie? I'm pretty sure she did. Because there are times as a dad, I'll say, you know, there's one person downstairs and a window's broken. Did you break the window? No, it wasn't me. You know, it was that imaginary squirrel that came and bashed it or something. You know, you didn't cause it, but you know what's going to happen. I'm going to tell you, sometimes well, just say with people with addictions. I already know some of the choices they're going to make, but it's definitely not me causing them.
Well, especially being a parent, I think sometimes something as mundane as teaching a child to ride a bicycle, you know they're going to fall. You know they're going to, it's just part of it. It has to happen.
Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
Well, with like asking them, did you do this? You know they're gonna lie,
Yes.
but you're giving them a chance to maybe redeem themselves a little bit.
Yeah, which is what God was doing with Adam and Eve. You
Right.
know, what is this you have done? And Eve
Yeah.
said, oh, it's not my fault.
Yeah.
And Adam says, it's not my fault.
That makes well, it's kind of like God, there is bad things that happen, but it's the good that he brings through it. The fact that you have the ability to lie. I think when the times, just say your child, if they have the ability to lie and that time they don't, they tell you the truth and you know they've told you the truth. To me, that moment is so much more,
It's a breakthrough.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's like he told the truth. You know, he did the right, and I think it's probably the same because God is our Father. It's the same way for us when you do the right thing.
Yeah. So the answer has to be you can know what's going to happen without causing. In other words, when the second plane was heading towards the second tower on 2011 or 2001, excuse me, 9/11, 2001, did we know what was going to happen?
Yeah.
Yes. Did we cause it? No. No, that's on a few. It's not on us, but we're watching the TV. We know what's going to happen. Prior knowledge does not mean cause. But let's talk about this just a little bit. So God does allow the suffering that sin has brought in our world to happen. Now, the neat thing is because he knows the choices we will make, good, bad, and ugly, to use a Clint Eastwood movie, he also then makes them work together for good, just like Romans 8:28 says. So I'm going to just give you the big section title of this long handout, way too long for us to talk about. There is suffering. So the question is, if God exists, why is there suffering? And they give a whole bunch of answers, interesting answers, more than I was going to do, but it kind of ties in now. There is suffering, so many will seek salvation. I believe that, by the way. There's suffering at our own hands, which is what we're talking about already. There's suffering because warnings are ignored. A lot of times, it's at our hands because we don't even pay attention to what God says. There is suffering for the purpose of new growth. So you think of, we have grapevines that have grown for the 25 years we lived in our house along our front fence. And we've never gotten full-size grapes out of them. Have we ever? I don't think so. Why not?
You don't cut back.
We don't cut them back. And that seems like it's doing violence to the plant. But it's necessary violence because otherwise there won't be the fruit that is desired. So sometimes there's suffering for the purposes of new growth. There is suffering to avoid greater suffering later. Now that's an interesting category. So how many of you got your COVID-19 vaccines? I'm going to guess most of us, yeah. Did any of you get sick from them? Donnie, you had a little reaction, I think. And you already had COVID and got sick from it too. Did you have a reaction to both shots?
Sure did.
The grand trifecta. I'm sorry. So when people get sick from a vaccine, that's suffering that comes into their life because they received the vaccine. What is the purpose of that suffering? To prevent greater suffering. Yeah, it is but you take your kids, what is it? How many shots do you have to get at once sometimes? Like 2 or 3 all at the same day? 4? Well, I'm going to tell you, none of my kids like getting all those shots in one day. They didn't like getting one shot. But we cause them suffering to save them from much worse suffering. A little pain now, a lot less pain later.
You can say that about this.
What?
Discipline.
Oh, it is total. But you understand. So what I'm trying to do is get you to see. So God allows suffering. Does He have a purpose? Does He work it for good? Well, now we're talking about some of the different ways. There's suffering to make us stronger. My basketball coach made me run lines. And if you were one of the slowest people running lines, which I always was, then we had to run more lines. And that's really unfair when you're already slow and tired and now you're running more and everybody laughs at you and makes fun of you. And when you finally get to the shower, there's no hot water left, you know? Do you feel sorry for me? Well, that's kind of my own fault. but you know, why did he do that? Well, you know, we were playing small college teams and we were all 30. I was a young guy, like 27 years old at the time. And we were playing 18-year-olds. Our life was not athletics. Our life was preparing to be a pastor. Many were already married, had kids. So this is a hobby. It's not, you know, we're not in shape. We're just out there having fun. But our coach, because he worked us so hard, we became an actually decent, I'm not going to lie to you and say good, but a decent basketball team. And we went from winning one game in a season to winning one more than 500 game in a season. I mean, woo, winning season, that's something there. But he worked us hard, caused me personal pain, but he made me the best athlete I've ever been, and unfortunately, I don't ever see it coming again. But yeah.
We call those
Suicide, yeah. We call them lines, but that was. Yeah, and that one of their categories is they're suffering because we live in a fallen world, which is kind of the main point. Why is the guy born blind? Because we live in a fallen world. But even though God allowed that to happen because of sin, he used it for his kingdom. And he undid the damage that, you know, that suffering had brought. There's suffering to remind us that we need help. You know what? One of the greatest things that happens sometimes if you have cancer is you have pain. Now, it doesn't seem like that'd be a good thing, does it?
Cancer is a silent killer. If you don't
Yeah,
feel it,
if you don't know, if you're not having any symptoms, you're going to die of cancer because it's going to spread. It's going to be everywhere. You want to have symptoms. Every so often, you know, your appendix is going bad and they go in and then while they're taking care of your appendix, they discover, whoa, there's this other stuff, you know. That's the grace of God that they find it without symptoms. But, you know, the pain that we have in this life really is to remind us of our need for God. There's this purpose. And, yeah, there's suffering to remind us we need help. Yeah, they got more categories. There's suffering when we take shortcuts. Boy, does that. You know. Anyway, but so, you know, we've got God who gives us free will, not because he wants us to hurt ourselves, but because he wants us to love him. And then when we hurt ourselves, he continues to love us and he does something to help us in our even sadder situation. And he sends Jesus. And it's interesting, Jesus, when he brings us into heaven, all suffering is ended. No more pain, no more illness, no more death, no more dying. All that stuff is over. All suffering is over. But even on this side of heaven, it is Christ who begins to take away the consequences of sin. Not in its entirety, but he really does. For example, relationship problems. You know, your desire will be for your husband will desire to rule over you. What happens when Christ is involved in a marriage? Instead of a battle of, I get to control. No, I get to control. I win. You know, instead of that.
He's the balancing point.
Yeah. Now all of a sudden we want to outdo and each other in serving, not in winning. We want to submit to one another out of love. You know, now it's a totally different view of it. You know, now it's who can wash the other person's feet the most. You know, it's not. Denise, I wouldn't ask her to do that to me. Yeah. But yeah, I'm always. Doug Travis at confirmation retreats will always wash people's feet. I always feel bad because he washes mine too. That's really. I always go last because I don't want anyone else to be contaminated. But you know that it's the relationship struggles change. By the way, if Christ is an active, integral part of marriage, does it make a difference in relationship success?
It is.
Absolutely, it does. You know, so Christ is undoing the damage. What about there's so much suffering that's from our bad choices. Christ helps us to make better choices. It's still going to be suffering, but maybe we don't bring as much in on ourselves. So, for example, if I don't overdrink, I'm probably never going to crash my car because I'm drunk. I can crash my car anyway, and I have one. So, I don't think it was your company that came and got me. This is a long time. Yeah. Yes.
Well, the other day somebody asked me something about marriage and all that, and I said, well, it's really about trying to outlove each other.
Yes.
And it's not what can I get from him, it's what can I give him. And
Exactly.
the whole thing is trying to be, so it's a new argument. That's why I was laughing. It's a new argument, not like, why don't you, the argument now is, I love you more, no, I love you more, type of thing.
Well, and if we are deciding where to go to a restaurant, now, if my daughter Mary's involved, she'll decide, so it's easy, or Deb will, I guess. If it's Denise and I'll say, well, wherever you want to go, it's fine with me. I don't care. And I mean that. I want her to pick some place that she likes, and she'll, well, where do you want to go? And then it takes 20 minutes for us to finally someone pick one, because we just did. Does that ever happen in your house too? Yeah. Isn't it aggravating a little bit? Because I kind of want to just decide then, but no, I really want her to decide, and she really wants me to decide.
So
And
then we just decide what we have a gift.
yeah, wherever we have a gift card, we're going. That's a good reason anyway.
That's why I want to open a restaurant.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah, I don't care. Yeah, I don't care. Okay, that's a good
We
choice.
can go there.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like that store in Dillsboro. Yes, dear.
Yes.
Because you're going to go in there and wives are going to find all kinds of things that they think are super spectacular. And the husband's job is to say the name of the store. Yes, dear. I love that store. We bought stuff there too.
It's
And
not there anymore.
no, I know. It was clever, but I like that. I don't care.
On your list, you have Romans 5:3.
We can look at it because we were right there. Romans 5:3. I didn't have it yet.
Because I think that's a reason.
Yes, so we can look at that since we're in Romans 5, and then I'm going to bring up something else, though, too, because we're almost out of time. Not only so, but we also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not disappoint us because God has poured out his love into our hearts by the Holy Spirit, whom he has given us. And I'm just going to focus, because of time, on one thing there. Suffering ends up with us being filled with hope. Now, think about this. I was worried about something, and God got me through it. Some of what I worried about happened, a lot of it didn't. God got me through it. Then I was worried about something else, and some of it happened, most of it didn't, and God got me through it, and it wasn't so bad. And then that keeps happening. Now, when at some point, I should get to where I don't even get worried when something happens, because I already know I have hope that God's going to get me through it. And I will tell you, with my anxiety disorder, I do not worry anywhere near what I used to 30 years ago. Now, I'm not telling you I don't ever worry, because that would be a lie. But it's getting harder and harder to do it because God has been so good to me, and everything I worry about kind of works out one way or another. Either it's not as bad, or it doesn't happen at all, or it was just as bad as I thought, but we survived and now things are getting better. Whatever. It's you start having that faith that God's going to get me through it, and it doesn't matter. And boy, is that a vital skill. So, why does God allow suffering? He's making us stronger. He's building character. He's helping us to develop the skills that will not only help us, but radiate out from us into the world so that people can see the answer is a close walk with him. Yes, I wasn't trying to ignore you.
You're all right. You made me think of something. You touched on the fires in California. There are certain trees whose seeds can only germinate if they come in contact with
Absolutely. And it's only when there's a forest fire that those seeds will. And, in Montana, we lived in Montana for a year, well, Denise for 6-ish months, I guess. Maybe, 8 months, I guess. But there was one time when the mountains, we were in a valley, Missoula, Montana, surrounded by mountains, and the mountains were on fire right outside the city. So kind of tough conditions because everything's smoke and ashes and everything. And Denise asked a question, and I'm going to tell it, but I'm not making fun of my wife. She said, "Why aren't they sending fire trucks up there?"
Because we passed like 3 fire stations.
Yeah, and they're just all sitting there. It's on the mountaintop. There's no roads. There's no. So they do have a plan, to protect houses. And you think of what are the smoke jumpers, the guys who will go in, cut a fire break, and try to keep the fire from spreading to areas where people live. But in Montana, they have a whole different attitude about forest fires. They just let them burn, unless people's homes or lives are in jeopardy. Because what that does is it brings about tremendous new growth. And for animal life, it's so much better. All those trees that are 100 feet up, nobody's eating the food off of that hardly. I guess squirrels can go up, but I mean, nothing else does. But boy, when all that brush starts growing and those small trees start growing, now there's food in abundance, and animals will survive the harsh winters far better, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's exactly what you said. What is that? Is it the phoenix? What is the phoenix?
Rises from the ashes.
Yeah, and I always figured that, St. John's, the apostle, the symbol was the eagle. But I think St. John's, the congregation, our symbol is the phoenix. And we rise from the ashes. A kind of, not that that's a real thing, but you understand. Yes.
They say that's why California is having such problems now. They're controlled burns. They quit them 10 years ago or something, and now the undergrowth there, when the wildfire.
Well, and they don't allow selected harvesting of trees in Montana. Harvesting trees, which creates breaks so that if there is a massive fire, it's going to stop somewhere. They're not doing that. And remember, Donald Trump, I think that was one of many things he got in trouble with, and he said, it's kind of your own fault, but it was.
Yeah.
Montana has a whole different view of things than California, and, the environmentalists say you shouldn't shoot animals and you can't cut down a tree. Neither one of those is necessarily best for nature. In Wisconsin, if they don't have deer hunted in the fall, they starve to death by the tens and tens of thousands. And that is not a humane thing either. And selected harvesting, I'm not talking about clear cutting all the mountains or anything. Selective harvesting actually is critical because it provides new growth and it provides fire breaks. Having people go in and clear out the underbrush, again, just vital stuff. But yeah, all right, I got. Here's the one thing I just want to mention, and then we got to end. For the main thing I want to we'll pick this up next week. But when we talk about our suffering, the thing this is 2 Corinthians 4:17. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweigh them all. Our light and momentary sufferings. Because this is temporary. So God allows temporary suffering, but it is just for a little while. I've told the story quite a few times, so this is probably a repeat for many of you. When I had braces for, like 4 years, and then headgear and retainers for another 8, 10, 20 years, I don't know, forever it seemed like. But I didn't brush my teeth adequately when I had braces, so I had a whole slew of cavities. And I would go to the dentist, and he always had appointments in the middle of the day, like at lunch hour at school. And my mom, being a mean mom that she was, made me go back to school after my dentist appointment. I thought we should be done for the day. That seems reasonable. Well, the first time I went and had a filling done, used Novocaine, and I go back to school, and my lips drooping, and I'm drooling. And, I was not successful with young ladies anyway, but say I'm 13 or 14. But when you're walking around drooling at them with one side of your lip down, it's not going to be good. So from then on, I told the dentist, you drill and fill, but don't give me Novocaine. Now, I'm going to tell you, when he's drilling on the dead stuff, it didn't hurt. When he got to the live stuff, boy, did it hurt. But it was only for a little while, and I could handle that because when he sees me, he knows, okay, I can stop. And he did, and then it didn't hurt. It was only for a little while. And momentary troubles in this world are far outweighed by the eternal joys that are before us. And I just say that because, remember, we want to maintain hope in the midst of suffering. For those that see only gloom, despair, and agony on me, we want to be the opposite. Peace, hope, and joy, even though we suffer too. In fact, Christians sometimes suffer in different ways, maybe even more intense ways, because we grieve over the condition of the world. We grieve for those who are making those bad choices, like Jesus on the edge of Jerusalem, weeping for those who are going to miss out. We weep over some things that nobody else probably does, but they're just temporary. And then comes eternity. And, I figure, I can handle this. You can kind of think of life in this world as kindergarten, and then the rest of life is everything after. This is just the little stuff. So if it's rough for a little bit, we can handle it. And then comes eternity.
And it's interesting that I think of Haiti when you were over there and how the poverty they had, the way they were suffering was more than anything we've ever seen in any place we've been. And they had faith, a strong faith. And I think of the sufferings we go through here, and people are losing faith for those, I don't want to say smaller sufferings, because to everybody their suffering is theirs. But, I'm reading time after time where people are martyred for their faith, and the one that got me was a 12-year-old girl got kicked out of her house for not
Converting to Christianity.
converting to Christianity, and she didn't never once think of I'm just gonna
Renounce my faith. I just have to make a quick comment. So when I went to Haiti, I went on, there was probably about 25 of us that were representatives of a bunch of Lutheran congregations from the different parts of the United States. The Lutheran Coalition is what it was called. Food for the Poor is kind of an interdenominational group. Started mainly Roman Catholic, but we don't care. If it helps people, we don't care, where it started. But so they're taking this bus over this awful road that did not exist until 2 years before we came. This village was totally isolated, cut off from the rest of Haiti. It's up in the mountains, and it's a scary road. In fact, on the way back, it was pouring rain for us, and the bus started sliding down this one hill, and literally the front tire on the driver's here was not on ground. It was over the edge of this cliff, and one of my friends was sitting right over that wheel, and he just said, "Pray," which we already were. But then the driver got control of the bus, and we were okay, but it was a scary moment. But so we're driving into this town where there's not many vehicles that come into it all. Mainly it's burros and horses that they'll use to get back and forth. And we come over the crest of this hill, and we have to stop because on the road, for as far as we could see, were hundreds and hundreds of people dressed in their mainly white, but their Sunday clothing, what they'd wear when they go to church, holding up signs saying "Welcome Lutheran Coalition" or "Thank you." We had helped build, I think, 12 homes, and we're working on building a school. But they lived in huts, and these homes were concrete, metal roof. They could withstand hurricanes, which they needed to. But I went to their church service, and it's in French Creole, which is what the people of Haiti speak, and didn't understand much of what was said, but the spirit that they sang, like they sang Amazing Grace in French Creole, it was the most beautiful thing I think I've ever heard. And they're living in tremendous poverty with nothing. Most of them were sleeping on dirt floors with cardboard and tin pieces tied together to make a hut. Unbelievable poverty. But they get together and they fill their church with praise for God. And there is something. They're enduring stuff, but they endure it with faith and with hope. And to me, there's a life lesson there, because my life is so blessed. I mean, really, I should never feel sorry for myself at all. And yet we all do sometimes, Faith and hope and love. These three, the greatest of these is love. All right, let's close in prayer. We'll pick this up next time. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much that you're with us in the suffering and that you redeemed us from this suffering. We thank you that this suffering is only temporary, and then comes an eternity with you in the glory and majesty of heaven. Help us to be able to answer the question, Why? If there's a loving God, why? Help us to be able to reassure them that the suffering is temporary, but that you are real.